I stood in that kitchen, early morning light creeping through lace curtains, as the stack of medical bills loomed like silent judgments. The envelope edges yellowed. The handwriting faint. My fingers trembled before I touched them. That kitchen once smelled of Sunday dinners, greens, cornbread, talk of future plans. But today, it smelled like failure. I raised Kendricks alone after Harlan passed. I cleaned houses, scrubbed floors, stretched every dollar so my son could go to college. I believed that sacrifice meant something. I believed in him. The phone rang. His name flashed, Kendricks. My heart both leapt and froze. He sounded distant, polite, hollow. I asked softly, "Son, can you help cover Dad's treatments?" There was silence. Then, "Mother, I'm sorry. I already spent $230,000 taking Delphine to Paris. I can't cover that now." Wind left me. The spoon I held slipped. Clattered to the floor. Time stalled. My son prioritized a honeymoon over his dying father. I didn't cry. I stood frozen. The weight of being invisible pressed in. They say pride precedes a fall. But what about the fall when your pride is taken from you before you notice? I tried to reason. Maybe he's under pressure elsewhere. Maybe he forgot who raised him to pray, who never asked for much. I remembered a sermon, "Family ain't who you raise. It's who remembers you when you fall." I clung to that. He once told me, at graduation, "Mama, one day I'll take care of you." I whispered that line in the dark. Did I mishear? Was it a statement or a promise to protect his image? In my mind I replayed that day 3 years ago. I'm helping them move into their first home. Delphine barely hides a glance, then says, "You can leave the boxes by the door, Ms. Red." Not Mama. Ms. Red. Hurt. Then to a bridesmaid, he owes her too much. That kind of guilt gets heavy. My hands full, a box marked family photos fell. Tape ripped. Photos spilled, images of laughter, birthdays, old times. I stooped to gather them, and that was the first crack in my heart. Back then, I thought love would repair it. On the porch at dusk, Lucille joined me sipping sweet tea. Her eyes soft but firm. "Girl, you done gave that boy everything but your last breath." My lips pressed shut. "And he just asked for that too," I whispered. Silence hung differently now, like the pause before a storm. I wasn't broken. I was gathering. Later, I found the comb. My mother's wooden comb, scratched, worn. I ran it gently through thinning hair. Mama used to say, "You can't tame a storm, baby, but you can ride it." I stared at my reflection. No victim, no casualty. Someone waking. I picked up the notebook titled House Notes. First line, plan, a single word, heavy with intent. "You'll remember who I am, Kendricks. Maybe not as your mama, but as your reckoning." For years ago, on a warm spring afternoon, I sat 3 rows back at my son's wedding. Not the front. Not beside the bride's mother. I was tucked somewhere behind cousins I hadn't seen since Harlan passed. A blur of pink and white swirled down the aisle, and I clapped like I meant it, like I belonged. But I didn't. I heard Delphine whisper to her bridesmaid, "She's not really part of our new family. She's just his past." It wasn't meant for me to hear, but it found me. And it stayed. Later, during the reception, her cousin nudged me and said, "Would you mind helping pass out the plates?" Just like that, the mother of the groom became help. I didn't make a scene. I carried that tray like I carried every burden, quiet and upright. They toasted to love, to legacy, to the future. Not a single word about me. Kendricks danced to a song for Mama, and I watched, waiting for his eyes to meet mine. He never looked back. That song wasn't for me. A week had passed since that phone call. Since my world got quieter, colder. I walked through the farmer's market, plastic bag in one hand, loneliness in the other. That's when I ran into Sister Raynell. She smiled like nothing had changed. "Has Kendricks helped out with Harlan's chemo bills yet?" she asked. Her tone was light, casual, like she was asking about Sunday's potluck. I smiled. "He's doing what he can." What I meant was, he's doing nothing. I went home to find another envelope in the mailbox. Hospice. Final notice. I opened it with steady hands, like peeling off a bandage too slow. My mind wandered back. Years ago, Kendricks asked for $10,000 to start his business. Said it was a loan. Said he'd pay me back soon as he got on his feet. He got on his feet, all right. Bought a penthouse. Paid for Delphine's yoga retreat in Costa Rica. But not once did he mention the debt. I pulled out a yellow notepad from the junk drawer. Wrote across the top all the ways I gave. Underneath it, all the ways he forgot. The list grew faster than I expected. That evening, Lucille came by with a box of Popeyes and a menthol in her hand. We sat on the porch like we always did, letting the crickets fill the silence. I told her about the Paris trip. About the $230,000. She didn't blink. Just sucked her teeth. "Baby, it's not just what he did. It's what you taught him he could get away with." I flinched. Not from the words, from the truth in them. "I thought I was teaching him grace," I whispered. Turns out I was teaching him entitlement. That night, I climbed up into the attic. It smelled like dust and memories. I pulled down boxes, birth certificates, tax returns, even an old promissory note Kendricks wrote at 23. Back when he still believed in paper and promises. I took photos of everything. Uploaded them to a folder in my private email. Labeled it, "When They Ask Why." Then I called Mrs. Darby. She worked at the courthouse now. I helped her through a rough patch once. Figured maybe she could help me ask some questions. The next Sunday, I wore my best blue dress to church. The one Harlan loved. Kendricks and Delphine walked in late, sat 2 rows ahead like they hadn't buried me in shame. Delphine turned, whispered something with a smirk. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Pastor preached about broken covenants and generational debt. Said, some folks inherit blessings. Others inherit burdens. I didn't move. Just let his words sit in my chest like bricks. The choir sang No Weapon. I mouthed every word. Not for comfort. For confirmation. After service, Sister Raynell caught up to me in the vestibule. She handed me an envelope, saying, "Oops, I think this one's yours." I nodded and took it without thinking. Back home, I opened it on the kitchen table. It wasn't mine. It was a letter. From Kendricks. To the deacon board. He was asking them to cancel my fundraiser. Called it unnecessary use of church funds. Said it wasn't aligned with modern outreach values. I folded the letter slowly, like pressing a wound shut. Put it in my purse. Stared out the window. All right then, I said aloud. If love forgot its debt, I'll just make it remember. The morning light crept across my bedroom floor, thin and pale, the kind that doesn't warm anything. I sat up before the alarm went off, staring at the letter still lying on my nightstand. Kendricks's words to the church were burned into my mind, unnecessary use of funds. My hands had stopped shaking days ago, but the ache behind my ribs stayed. I reached for the comb beside the letter, the one that used to belong to my mother. It felt heavier now, like it carried the silence I'd been swallowing. My home had gotten too quiet. Even the refrigerator hummed low, like it didn't want to disturb me. I stood in the doorway of the living room, looking at the old photos of Kendricks as a boy, missing tooth, Sunday shoes too tight. Each picture felt like a ghost of the woman I used to be. I realized something that morning: I was disappearing. Not dying, just fading, like a name rubbed off a headstone. And for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow about it. I felt insulted. 2 days later, an envelope came in the mail. Fancy paper, thick and perfumed, sealed in gold. I recognized Delphine's touch before I even flipped it over. MT Zion Charity Gala, presented by Delphine Kendricks Foundation. I should have thrown it out right there, but I opened it anyway. Inside, my name sat wrong, Odessa Langley Smith. The second S in Langley like a bruise that wouldn't heal. I held it for a long time, letting the weight of that extra letter sink in. People think mistakes are harmless, but I knew better. I'd lived my life being renamed, reduced, rewritten. One letter wrong was a whole history erased. That night I made tea and stared out the window, and the memory came back, the first gala. Kendricks had invited me, proud of his new company. I wore a pale blue dress I'd saved up for, hoping he'd see me like I saw him. But when I got there, I was invisible. His coworkers asked if I was the caterer's help. One woman even handed me her empty glass. I smiled and took it because that's what you do when you've been taught not to make scenes. Kendricks laughed when his friends teased, "Your mama's working hard tonight," and said, "She just likes to help out." Later, when I tried to sit near him, he said softly, "Mama, you don't have to try so hard." That was the night something in me went cold. I remember folding my gloves neatly on the table and walking out into the night air, hearing the sound of laughter spill behind me like a closing door. Now, years later, the laughter echoed differently, sharper, uglier. I looked at the new invitation and decided I'd go this time, but not for them. For me. I filled out the RSVP card and wrote yes in ink. Then I called Mrs. Darby. She owed me a favor, but I didn't mention that. "I'll be at that gala," I told her, "and I'd like you there too. Just observe." She didn't ask questions. The smart ones never do. For a week, I prepared quietly. Pressed my one good dress. Polished my shoes. Wrote notes in my little book, how they speak to me, who looks away, who laughs first. I wasn't angry anymore. I was studying. When the night came, I arrived early. The room sparkled, gold linens, champagne, fake smiles. Delphine floated through it all in sequins, every step rehearsed. Kendricks was beside her, taller, older, but with the same careless grin that used to melt me. The MC took the stage, reading names from a list. "We'd like to thank Ms. Langley for her support of tonight's event." Everyone clapped. Delphine waved. My name wasn't called. I looked down at my program, Odessa Langley. 3 S's, 1 lie. The people around me whispered. I felt it, that hot, prickling shame rising up the back of my neck. But this time, I didn't bow my head. I sat there, hands folded, letting the silence hang heavy around me like smoke. When the lights dimmed for the slideshow, I stood up. Walked slow. Nobody stopped me. I found Mrs. Darby near the back and handed her my program. "Keep that," I said. Proof. She nodded once. Outside, the air felt different, not clean, but real. Lucille was waiting in her old sedan, engine running. She looked at me through the open window. You good? I'm better than that, I said, sliding into the seat. We drove off slow. The city lights stretched behind us like old wounds, shining but empty. I leaned my head against the window and whispered to myself, they erase my name, but I'll make them remember it. That night, before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote only one line, if they can strike me out in ink, I'll write myself back in proof. The day after the gala, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. I reached over, slow, already knowing nothing good was waiting. Texts, missed calls, even a voicemail from Sister Clarine asking if I'd gotten sick or something. Folks were whispering. One message stood out. Forwarded from someone I didn't even know, who was the lady in row 3. They skipped her name altogether. I read it twice. Then I put the phone down on the dresser and stared out the window. It was cloudy. Quiet. Like the world had paused just to give me space to decide how I wanted to respond. I didn't cry. Not anymore. That part of me had dried up. I just sat on the edge of the bed, pulled open my voice recorder app, and whispered, document everything. It was time to stop surviving and start collecting. Later that morning, I picked up the phone again and called Kendricks's office. Asked if I could meet with him sometime this week, just a simple sit-down. Clarity, I told his assistant, not confrontation. But she said he was in meetings all week, important ones, and she'd pass along my request. I said thank you. Then I pressed record and saved that call. You can dodge me in public, I thought, but you still gotta answer to the one person who knows every time you ever lied. Around noon, Lucille showed up with 2 sweet teas and a bag of lemon cookies from the corner store. I was still wearing my old church dress from the night before, hadn't bothered to change. We sat on the porch, the wood creaking under us like it had something to say. You're more than a name on paper, she said, handing me a cookie. They can misspell you, skip you, talk around you. Doesn't make you any less real. I told her about the gala. About how they skipped me. About how they handed Delphine credit for things she never touched. Lucille didn't flinch. Just sipped her tea and said, let the record speak, baby. You don't have to shout when you got truth on paper. I nodded. That line stuck to my ribs. The next morning, I showed up at Kendricks's office, unannounced. Carried one of his old books I'd borrowed, something about strategy and vision. Told the front desk girl I was just returning it. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Inside, the place looked different, colder, like it had shed any trace of where he came from. Delphine was in there, dressed sharp, signing checks like she owned the walls. Kendricks was across the room brushing off some young staffer who looked nervous just breathing. I didn't interrupt. Just walked slow. Pretended to glance at the bookshelf, but my eyes landed on his desk calendar. One date circled in red, Charity Gala Recap Meeting. Before I could move, I heard Delphine say, we'll spin her absence as voluntary. Keeps the story clean. I backed away before they saw me. That moment changed something. Hearing your own erasure plotted out loud, it don't cut like a knife. It burns. That Saturday, there was a block party over on Marlowe. Church elders, kids running wild, somebody frying catfish under a pop-up tent. I came late. Just wanted to see people. Feel normal. But life had other plans. One of the elders brought up the gala, asking if I had a good time. I opened my mouth, then a man I didn't know jumped in. I heard they skipped Ms. Red's name intentionally. Whole room saw it. The folks around us got quiet. Not out of pity, out of awareness. People whispered, looked at me. I didn't say a word. Just looked that man in the eye, gave a small nod, and sipped my water. The silence said enough. My absence had become presence. When the music picked back up, I slipped away, walked to my car. Closed the door, pulled out my recorder, and whispered, "You erased me once. I'll carve my own return." I paused before putting the recorder down. Then it beeped. And right then, like some twisted joke, another message popped up on the screen. From Delphine, "We need to talk, Mama." The morning didn't greet me. It just arrived. The way heavy fog settles in, not asking permission. Omari was already gone to school, Kendrick's, wherever he stayed these days. I moved slow, like my bones weighed more than they should. The kitchen felt hollow, like even the walls didn't want to speak to me. I sat down with a cup of lukewarm coffee I hadn't meant to make. No sound but the low tick of the clock and the soft clink of the spoon I kept stirring long after the sugar had melted. I reached for my phone. Nothing. No texts. No missed calls. Not a single word from the people who used to ask what kind of pie I was bringing to Sunday potluck. I stepped out front, shuffled down the steps in my house shoes, and opened the mailbox. Bills. Coupons. Some political flyer I didn't care to read. Absence has a voice louder than late apologies, I said aloud, though I didn't mean to. That afternoon, the door creaked open. Omari's backpack hit the floor like it always did. I smiled and opened my arms, ready for his hug. He paused, fidgeting. "Grandma," he asked, "who is she again?" My heart did something ugly right then. "Who's who, baby?" "The lady Daddy says is my grandma. The one at his house." I stood still, too long. He shifted his weight, confused. I swallowed hard. "I'm your grandma, sweetheart. Always have been. Always will be." He blinked, then just nodded and walked away, dragging that little plastic fire truck behind him. Later that week, I walked into choir practice, same building, different feeling. I wasn't used to sitting in the back row. I wasn't used to being invisible. But that's how they made me feel, like a name no one dared say too loud. "She ain't even sitting up front no more. They say he bringing Delphine next Sunday." I heard it. All of it. I kept my mouth shut. The Lord didn't give me ears just to pretend I'm deaf. Delphine was working the room like she'd been elected to something. Grinning at every elder. Holding Kendrick's arm like she earned it. That fake, polished smile like she didn't have to steal to get where she stood. Brother Ellis walked past me, paused, and laid a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Stay strong, Sister Red." That touch reminded me I wasn't entirely forgotten. Not yet. After practice, as folks were filing out, she came over. "Delphine. You've had your moment," she said, all casual like, "let the new family have theirs." I didn't say a word for a beat. Just looked her square in the eye. "You know what, Delphine? Some things don't need a moment. They're permanent." She blinked. Just once. And I walked past her before she could follow up. At home, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder marked "When They Ask Why." It held everything I'd saved. Screenshots. Meeting notes. Photos. Every time I was left off an email thread, every time my name got moved to the bottom of a program. I typed a letter to the church board. Anonymous. Direct. Bullet points. No bitterness, just truth. Let them sit with it. Then I send a quick message to Mrs. Darby. I'll need that promissory note, the record log from last March, and the committee message thread. Please and thank you. Lastly, I ordered a voice recorder online. Small. Unnoticeable. Just in case I needed to play back what people pretend they didn't say. On Sunday, I stopped by the church to pick up some leftover choir robes. On my way out, something on the bulletin board caught my eye. Annual board meeting, next Friday at 7 p.m. My eyes didn't leave that paper. I stood there so long the custodian turned off the hallway lights, not realizing I hadn't moved. I left the church slow. Thoughtful. When I got home, I walked straight to my bedroom. My mother's comb sat on the dresser. Worn, smooth, still strong. I tucked it into my purse like armor. They wanted me silent, I said, standing in the mirror. They'll hear me from the front row. I woke to an email notification in the dark. The subject line, a bank notice, Kendricks had filed paperwork to remove my name from the joint property deed. I sat up, staring at the screen, my chest tight. My fingers hovered over the mouse. He tried to erase me legally, as if I were a name on a piece of paper and nothing more. I remembered the way Harlan used to say, "Don't ever let your name be your debt." He meant, never let someone claim your existence is contingent. My hands trembled, but I steadied them. This wasn't shock anymore, this was my turning point. By midday, I was digging through old files in my closet, pulling out mortgage statements, titles, tax returns, earlier signatures, receipts and legal copies I'd kept just in case. I found anomalies. Dates missing, sections crossed out, signatures that looked like shadows. In one deed, my name vanished completely, replaced by blank lines. In another, a signature I didn't recognize. I photographed every page, every red mark, every missing line. I assembled them in a folder titled Undoing the Undoing. Each photo felt heavy. Justice held in pixels. Then came the flowers. Roses in a vase, by my front door, delivered with a card addressed to Mrs. Langley. I held the card long enough for the letters to sink. Mrs. Langley. Not Odessa. Not Red. Langley. The florist confirmed the order came from Chablis. No apologies. No explanation. I kept silent. I folded that card and tucked it into my notebook. I remembered all the times my name had been miswritten, ignored, overwritten. Each slip a fissure. Later I walked into Kendricks's office under the pretense of dropping off church paperwork. When I asked to speak with him, he greeted me with a practiced smile. "Mom, you must be mistaken. I don't know what this is about." I watched his face, calm but guarded. He leaned back. "You're confused about how business works." My voice was soft, fierce. "Confused doesn't remove my name from what's mine." He looked away. No answer. That silence was his confession. I left and called Essie. Told her I needed her to confirm she saw Delphine place that flower order. She listened, then agreed. I called Lucille next. Then Sister Raynell. Each of them agreed to recount whenever they'd seen programs where my name was replaced, records retyped, mentions edited out. I recorded their statements on my phone. Voices strong, clear, unwilling to bow. Late that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the deed copy spread before me. I traced the blank spaces, the removed name, the erasure. I whispered, "You took my name. Now I'll take my story back." The phone rang, unknown number. "Did you get the deed I sent you?" a voice asked, cold. A letter came wrapped in quiet, no warning, just a plain envelope slid through the mail slot. It was addressed to the estate of Harlan Red, with my name underneath in smaller print. I stared at it, fingers still slick from dishwater. The handwriting wasn't familiar. Inside, a folded legal document, yellowed at the edges but sealed with a notary's stamp. My breath slowed. It was a will, Harlan's will. Dated years before Kendricks got his hands into everything. The language was plain: Odessa Red, sole beneficiary. All property, all holdings, all decisions. Not a whisper of Kendricks's so-called revisions. I stood still for what felt like an hour. Then I made copies, 3. One in my kitchen drawer, one tucked between Psalm 37 and Proverbs 3 in my Bible. The original I slid behind the photo of Harlan and me at the revival tent in Macon, back in '91. He always said, hide what matters where they'd never think to look, in the truth. I drove into the city the next morning, walked straight into the law office printed at the top of the will. I told the receptionist I was following up as a potential beneficiary, nothing more. The attorney, young and eager, sat across from me with his tie slightly crooked. "You say you're following up on the Red estate? Funny, I believe Mr. Kendricks Red filed closure documents years ago." That slip, that word, closure. It was too fast. Too rehearsed. I smiled thin and leaned in. Did he now? My phone was recording in my coat pocket. His eyes shifted. Too late. Later that week, I went to a church luncheon hosted by one of the older sisters in the neighborhood. They had lemonade, pound cake, gospel playing soft on the speakers. And whispers. I heard Ms. Red ain't doing well. She's in hospice, right? I turned slowly. The woman who'd said it didn't even look up from her chicken salad. "I was with her just yesterday," I said, cool. "She's still breathing and walking." The silence that followed felt like thunder. I returned home and called Darby and Lucille. Told them to come by. I made sweet tea, laid out all the documents, the will, the audio file, a list of every misdeed I could trace back to Kendricks and Delphine's camp. The paper looked like a crime board: arrows, footnotes, names. Lucille leaned in, eyes sharp. "You know they'll try to claim forgery. And if that don't work, they'll twist the church against you." Mrs. Darby tapped the will with her nail. "Let them try. We'll drown em in truth." We planned every detail: what to say, when to say it, what not to let slip. I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, as the sky dimmed and the cicadas buzzed louder than my thoughts, I set everything out in neat stacks. Labeled folders, a flash drive, hand-sketched bullet points for each question they might throw at me. No lawyer. Just me and what's right. I sat by the window. The church bells rang 7, just as they used to when Harlan would finish his sermons and we'd walk home, hand in hand. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "they'll have to reckon." I just laid my head down when the knock came. 3 times. Firm. Not rushed. I opened the door to a man I didn't know, in a dark hoodie, holding a small box. "This is for Ms. Red," he said. Inside the box, a USB drive, plain, and a note: "What you think is buried is still breathing." I clutched it, heart thudding. I worked in silence. The only sound was the old inkjet spitting out pages one by one. Contracts. Deeds. Transcripts. Every word a bruise I had to press on just to remember it was still there. Midnight came and went, and I was still at that table, sorting documents, arranging order in chaos. I pulled out the family photo album, the one with the torn leather spine and the loose pages from years of handling. I flipped through, then stopped. The new pictures, the ones from Chablis' birthday, the church banquet, I wasn't in them. Not one. My face either cropped or replaced. Even the group shots had a way of positioning me behind someone's head or cut off at the edge. They'd been curating a family history I didn't belong to anymore. I stared for a long while, then slid those photos out, tore them slow and clean, letting the pieces fall into the trash. Not out of bitterness. No. It was cleansing. A kind of ritual to make space. The art journal I hadn't touched in months found its way to my lap. I picked up a pencil. No references. Just let the lines come. What came out wasn't soft or pretty, it was a woman with tired eyes, jaw set tight, deep creases in her forehead. I scribbled a caption under it, "They tried to delete me. I draw me back." Then I opened a blank email, addressed it to every member on the church board, and typed, "I bring both my name and my story. You will hear both." By the time dawn colored the sky faint orange, I dressed, pressed my slacks, and made it to the church hall before most. The seats filled slowly, deacons, members, a few nosy neighbors. Kendricks was already seated with Delphine. She had on one of those ivory suits, legs crossed like she was posing for a church bulletin. Chablis caught my eye, offered a smirk. I took my seat close to the podium. The chairman gavelled in. Prayer. Routine business. Then I stood. "I have one matter of personal and communal interest," I said. "It concerns property rights, my name, and truth." I laid down the will, the original one. Then the copies. Then the folder marked fraud indicators. I said my piece, calm and measured. Kendricks's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man who wore his pride like cologne, stood and interrupted. "We'd like to present video documentation regarding Ms. Red's declining mental faculties." The lights dimmed. On screen, a shaky phone video, me looking lost in the grocery store, another clip of me fumbling a Bible verse at Sunday school. Edited together like some sloppy indictment. I didn't flinch. Let it roll. Let them try. When the lights came back on, it was quiet. Then a voice, "Let her speak." Another, "She deserves her name back." Sister Raynell stood. I've known this woman since I had my first grandbaby. She built this church with her hands and her prayers. Lucille came next. She didn't need a mic. You cannot silence love with paper. And you cannot rewrite a name written by God. That shifted something. Eyes went from cold to questioning. The board members started murmuring among themselves. The chairman cleared his throat. "We will now vote on the motion to reverse Ms. Red's removal from joint ownership." Hands lifted. But before the final count, Kendricks's lawyer leaned toward Delphine, whispered something. Delphine turned around, caught my eye, and mouthed, "He has one more card." And I knew this wasn't over. 1 week passed since the vote, but the memory of that church hall felt like it lived just beneath my skin. They reconvened just as promised, this time without the theatrics. The board voted again, and not a single hand stayed down. My name was restored. My dignity, written back into the deed like it should have never been touched. Kendricks didn't say much. Just stood there, eyes glassed over like he'd been hollowed out. He stepped down from his board position without a word. Folks clapped as I walked out, not for spectacle, not for drama, but because an elder had been seen. Really seen. That applause felt like an old hymn humming through my ribs. The next afternoon, I was out in the garden pulling weeds when the mail came. It was a plain envelope, no return address, just my name in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from Harlan's old attorney. Said Harlan had created a separate inheritance fund, one that would only activate if I was publicly disrespected by the family. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. Enough to plant roots somewhere else if I wanted. I sat there on the back step, letter in hand, and let the wind move around me. Even in death, I said to the wind, he knew the world would try to erase me. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Like I understood something now I hadn't before. Later that week, Lucille and some of the younger women from church came over. We sat around my kitchen table, tea steaming, laughter soft and honest. They asked me about Harlan, about the early days, about keeping one's ground. I told them, don't ever let your story be signed away by silence. Lucille asked if I missed preaching. I smiled, handed her my favorite church hat. I don't need a pulpit to preach, I said. I got y'all now. The next morning, I was out back again, this time planting sunflowers. My favorite. Harlan's too. I pressed the soil around the roots, slow and careful. Then placed a new little plaque beside the row, to those who bloom late, but bloom strong. I stood there a while, remembering. Not just what was taken, but what I had kept. My name. My mind. My spine. I saw flashes of years before, laughing with Harlan on the porch, Lucille in a choir robe, baby Kendricks holding my finger for the first time. All of it living in me like roots. When the sun dipped, I went back inside and sat down at my desk. Opened my laptop, hit record. I looked straight into the lens and said, the world won't always clap for you when you survive. But you still get to stand. And standing, my loves, is enough. I uploaded the video to the private family archive. Labeled it for future reads. Closed the laptop. It was near dusk when I heard the rustle at the porch. A plain envelope. No stamp. No name. Just slid beneath the door. I opened it. Inside, a birth certificate. A name I didn't recognize. I read it again. And again. Then whispered to the empty room, why would someone send me this now?